slow introduction. And Mother, we must say we are very much grateful to have your association again in this month because some of us knew you had a very tight schedule this month, but somehow you still found a way to be with us today. We're very much appreciative of that.
You're very kind.
Without further ado, we may put the verse on the screen and then you take it over from here.
Sure.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so
Hare
much.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Okay, Hare Krishna, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are in the world. So wonderful to be with all of you again. So we're going to be discussing and chanting Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 5, verse 48. If we could scroll down a bit. Okay. Tatte vayam loka shishikshaya yadya त्वयानुशिष्टास्त्रिभिरात्मभिस्म सर्वे व्यक्त्यः स्वविहारतन्त्रं न शक्नुमस्तत् प्रतिहर्तवेते. Translation. O original person, we are therefore but yours only. Although we are your creatures, we are born one after another under the influence of the three modes of material nature. And for this reason, we are separated in action. Therefore, after the creation, we could not act concertedly for your transcendental pleasure. Translation by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. The cosmic creation is working under the influence of the three modes of the external potency of the Lord. Different creatures are also under the same influence, and therefore they cannot act concertedly in satisfying the Lord. Because of this diverse activity, there cannot be any harmony in the material world. The best policy, therefore, is to act for the sake of the Lord. That will bring about the desired harmony. Let's just do Mangalarchana. Om Gyan Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yata Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sarvadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padhan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute. Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye. Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So I'm just going to read out the verse and purport again for 3.5.48 because they're very short. O original person, we are therefore but yours only. Although we are your creatures, we are born one after another under the influence of the three modes of nature, and for this reason we are separated in action. Therefore, after the creation, we could not act concertedly for your transcendental pleasure. Srila Prabhupada says, the cosmic creation is working under the influence of the three modes of the external potency of the Lord. Different creatures are also under the same influence, and therefore they cannot act concertedly in satisfying the Lord. Because of this diverse activity, there cannot be any harmony in the material world. The best policy, therefore, is to act for the sake of the Lord. That will bring about the desired harmony. So to give us a bit of context in terms of where we are and who's speaking. So chapter 3 is when Vidura, after having left home, encounters Maitreya Rishi. And he begins a very in-depth discourse with Maitreya Rishi going into the different glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In fact, if you study the whole Srimad Bhagavatam, the majority of verses spoken in the Bhagavatam are actually by Maitreya Rishi. And much of Sukadev Goswami's narration or speaking of Bhagavatam to Parikshit Maharaj are actually the things that Maitreya Rishi says. So this conversation between Vidura and Maitreya Rishi is it's very detailed, and their conversation's just beginning in this 5th chapter. So Maitreya Rishi is starting to begin to explain to Vidura creation, Mahatattva, what comes out of Mahatattva. And earlier on, so these prayers are actually part of and follow on from when Maitreya Rishi is explaining to Vidura that actually each of the elements that the Lord creates, sky, earth, air, water, light, fire, all of these things, they have a presiding personality. And he explains that these personalities, after being created, after being manifest, after being empowered with the ability of that particular element in creation, in cosmic creation, they actually turn to the Lord. These demigods, they turn to the Lord and they make prayers. And so this prayer, this is those demigods, those presiding demigods, or the presiding personalities of earth, air, water, fire, etc., because they are needed for cosmic creation. And so these presiding demigods of these material elements, they are Shakti Vaishya avatars. They've been empowered. So although they're jivas, they've been empowered with the ability to be responsible for, provide, govern, and act with the nature of a particular element, or govern some aspect of material creation. And yet their bodies, their minds, the false ego, as it's explained earlier on in this chapter, they are born of the combination of the modes of material nature, Mahamaya, or cosmic creation. And so they're now praying. This is part of their prayers. And they're saying to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, we're yours. We belong to you. We're empowered by you. We're part and parcel of you. We're expansions of you. But after having taken birth in bodies which are, the subtle body and the gross body, which is formed by the three modes of material nature interacting with cosmic creation, we have these amazing abilities that you've empowered us, these different activities, these different strengths and all of these different things. But because of the nature of cosmic creation, material energy, and the three modes of material nature, because our activities are variegated and our diversity of activities actually caused by the combination of false ego and the modes of material nature, it's also led to a diversity in purpose. And so we find ourselves not being able to concertedly act. Concertedly is like a concert, right? United, act in a united way, in harmony, synergistically after creation. So after we manifest, we've not been able to do anything else because we find ourselves diverse in our activity. It's almost like a plea. What should we do? This verse and the purport in it, although they're short, they're full of so much. Srila Prabhupada gives us, based on their prayers, both the cause of conflict in this world, that there will always be conflict in this world because of diversity of activity. But equally in this purport, he gives us the solution. That yes, in this world, because there is so much diversity of activity, right? There are more activities probably than different types of people. This cosmic creation that leads to diversity of activity because of this variegatedness created by the three modes of material nature and cosmic creation. And because of the diversity, there is not going to be harmony. However, if we want to create harmony and unity in this diverse atmosphere, in this diverse creation, then we have to employ the purpose by which actually our eternal nature operates on, the purpose by which the entire spiritual world is working towards, the purpose by which we are most happiest. And that is working together for the purpose of pleasing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So it's interesting that they're saying that therefore after creation we could not act concertedly for your transcendental pleasure. They're expressing that it's difficult. We know that actually the only way we can work together really is for your pleasure, but we are struggling because our activities are so diverse. So there's a plea there, there's a request. And so Prabhupada's reminding us that actually we must return to this original purpose. Yes, our activities will always remain diverse. That's natural. Our activities are diverse here, they're diverse in the spiritual world. But if we align our purpose, that will bring harmony. Rather than trying to negate or make activity all the same, make us all the same color, the same gender, the same varna, the same ashram. And we do this. We either do it by trying to create a level playing field, or we try and do it by acknowledging there's diversity, but adopting this gender is better than that gender, this color is better than that color, this temple is better than that temple, this language is better than that language. So we try and create this, hierarchy, which is born out of our anxiety to find peace. Even if we put spiritual harmony and cooperation and purpose aside, if we look at the world over, maybe we've done these things before. When communities come together, whether they are trying to bring about harmony and cooperation in the spirit of charity, or maybe they're having a protest against something that's, standing for righteousness. Maybe it's families. Wherever a group of people are coming together, where they are trying to create harmony, one thing you'll see is the one thing they'll unite on is purpose. There's that saying that my enemy's enemy is my friend, right? People will align themselves. We align ourselves and our identities very much with purpose. So we see this active principle, this principle of harmony is created by uniting in purpose. However, again, and in verse 29, it's interesting that the nature of the false ego is unpacked right from the point of creation. Describes how, and this is verse 29, Mahatattva, or the great causal truth, transforms into false ego, so transient identity, material identity, which is manifested in three phases: cause, effect, and the doer. All such activities are on the mental plane and are based on the material elements, gross senses, and mental speculation. The false ego is represented in three different modes: goodness, passion, and ignorance. So it's this false ego, this sense of I and mine, which makes us think that I am the cause, I am the effect, and I am the doer. And so when we're trying to just unite based on either activity or a transient purpose, based on the transient sense of self, which again comes back to a transient cause, a transient effect, and a transient sense of doing, then the harmony is also going to be very temporary and very transient. That's why when Prabhupada says harmony will never be achieved, he's not saying this to be harsh about material nature. He's not saying this to scare people and go, oh, look, you're never going to be happy here. What's the point? He's not being bullish. He's not being a bully. He's simply stating a fact that, with all this diversity, how are you going to find any harmony? Because even if you're united in purpose, your purpose, if it's just based on your transient sense of self, it's going to keep changing, which is why we find in every community at some point, people feel like I've outgrown this community or it doesn't meet my needs. Okay, so our unity may temporarily be manifest based on temporary purposes, but it will never be absolutely manifest because of temporary purposes. That's why we even see this in the Vaishnava community. If in our community, our unity is not that much based on pleasing Krishna, but much more based on pleasing a project or a particular person in a project or achieving certain goals for a project. When those things don't mean so much to our transient ego anymore, to our false ego anymore, to the current version of me that I'm identifying as me, then those things will lead to conflict and breakdown and separation. So although this is a simple prayer, a short purport, there's so much in here. So these are personalities who are empowered. They're Shaktavesha avatars. The empowered demigods are Shaktavesha avatars by dint of the fact that their ability to do what they're doing is directly given to them by the Lord. Srila Prabhupada states this very strongly when it's earlier stated in this chapter that these demigods are part and parcel of the Lord. They are empowered to manage the affairs of this material world. Prabhupada says we shouldn't be dismissive of them because they are devotees who have much more responsibility than we do in cosmic creation. So even them, they're saying, listen, it's challenging. Our dear Supreme Personality of Godhead is challenging. We can't do what we need to do because we are struggling because of the pulls of the modes of material nature and because of, by nature, cosmic creation makes us think we are the doer, the cause, and the effect. We can't behave in this concerted way. It's hard. And we want to serve you in a concerted manner. We want to serve you in concert. Right? You look at a concert, every instrument is different. And within each section of the instruments, whether it's the strings or the wind instruments, each instrument is different. And then you have the person playing the instrument. They're all different. Okay, you put all of these things together, there's so much diversity, but they all come together because we want to perform. We want to create a beautiful piece of music. It takes just one of them to go, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't like it. I'm not happy. I'm not happy with the way the conductor's doing this. I could have written a better piece of music. It just takes one person to say, I'm not cooperating. And that entire concert can get completely ruined. So these personalities, when they're praying to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that, listen, we've recognized this in ourselves. We simply can't do anything until we can work in a concerted manner for your pleasure. Please help us. They're recognizing that, this is, it's not a small feat to cooperate in the material world. When Srila Prabhupada says, your love for me will be shown by the way you cooperate. It wasn't a small instruction. He knew it was very hard. And we're hearing this right from the source, right from the get-go, from the beginning of creation. Those who are involved in creation are saying it is difficult to cooperate. Even though we want to cooperate for your pleasure, it's difficult because of the pushes and pulls of the diversity that's created by the modes of material nature. So how do we do it? We talk so much about coming together in purpose, unity and diversity. What are the techniques? And we talk about, appreciate people's qualities, appreciate their vulnerabilities, appreciate their strengths. But really, actually, Krishna's given us in the Bhagavad Gita, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, through his various agents, through all these wonderful teachers that have come over millennium, he gives us very clear instructions on how do we live in this world in such a way that knowing that there's this diversity, which is not born of the internal energy, it's born of the external energy, okay? And it's coupled with false ego. Despite knowing that the odds are stacked against us, how do we continue to unite? So Krishna gives us all of that. He actually gives it he gives it in the Bhagavad Gita. He gives it to Arjuna because Arjuna asked him the same question. How can I live in this world and never forget you? How can I live in this world being different to everybody else and cooperate with them in the spirit of loving devotional service? So Krishna has given many, many instructions. I wanted to focus on three that I feel that, if we can do all of them, then wonderful. But even if we can do one of them and go one at a time, and from time to time, different things are going to affect us, there's certainly things that can make it a lot easier. Often we may find ourselves disgruntled that there's divisiveness and a lack of harmony or unity in the community, whether it's in our local community or we look at the global community. And we may put the locus of control outside of ourselves. We may think, oh, it's because the organization isn't set up properly or the institution isn't set up properly. Or maybe even something that I was reflecting on is, as a collective movement, we have a collective consciousness. And as long as our collective consciousness averages as a Kanishta Adhikari or a beginner devotee, there's going to be divisiveness, there's going to be immaturity, there's going to be competition. But as our collective consciousness as a community upgrades to Madhyam, then there's far more peace and cooperation. And then what to speak of when our collective consciousness is averaging out to be of Uttam? We can transform the entire planet. So there's so many different factors one can attribute to outside of our locus of control. But ultimately, and this is the first thing I think we can all bring it back to, is where we want to create more harmony. Because that diversity we can't change. There's just no point. And we don't want it. Why do we all want to be vanilla? It's not going to make any sense. We'll be dissatisfied, right? First thing is we can remind ourselves that we have our own individual responsibility and accountability to ensure that we are engaging in the practices and services in such a way that it increases our desire to please Krishna. Okay, this united purpose is not just a lofty idea, a philosophical stance, which once we think, wow, this is a great idea, I'm going to live by this now, and that's enough. No, it's a heartfelt state of being that I want to please Krishna. It is the pulse and heartbeat of our relationship with Krishna. That am I pleasing you? Am I pleasing those that please you, like Guru and the Sadhus and the Vaishnavas, and ultimately every living entity? So we each have an individual responsibility to see that, am I engaging in services and practices on a regular basis that reinforce and nourish my desire to please Krishna? Because the more we are aligned with that purpose, that will have a knock-on effect in attracting more souls into our environment who are also aligned with that purpose. And to varying strengths, but ultimately the more we invest in that, the more we're going to attract those who can nourish and nurture that, whether they're our friends, fans, or heroes. Okay, so that's one thing that happens, but also those who are not aligned. Because we're really sending a clear message out to Krishna, to the universe, when we invest in services and practices that strengthen our desire to serve Krishna. We're sending a message out that if you're not aligned with this, move along. So we'll also see that people and situations that are not going to help that will get removed from our life. So if we find ourselves in situations where it's like, okay, there seems to be a lot of discord, there seems to be a lack of unity, and it seems to be coming from a place where people are not appreciating the diversity. They're not recognizing how these differences can all be stitched together in such a way that we can make a multicolored, beautiful coat for Krishna. Then we can ask ourselves, well, how much am I aligning? How much am I aligning? Is the way I'm serving, is the service that I'm doing, are the practices I'm engaging in being done in such a way, both quality and quantity, that it is nourishing and increasing my desire to please Krishna? Or am I simply just caught up in the body game again, just with a group of devotees? I put on the tilak, I put on the neck beads, I chant my japa, but I'm really just interested in reinforcing my temporary identity here, one that just happens to wear tilak. So it says this is the first thing, just bringing it back to our locus of control. Second thing is, and although I've put this second, in terms of Krishna's instructions to Arjun, in terms of taking this path of devotional service, he's very clear with Arjun that, it's really difficult. Just like these demigods are saying, it's difficult. It's difficult in the mode of goodness. What to speak of in the mode of passion and ignorance. But he says still, nevertheless, mode of goodness is the easiest place from which to practice this. So the second thing we can do is really see, have I continued to align my body, mind, and words at least into the mode of goodness, so I can move into transcendence. Because if we look at our 9 processes of devotional service, the lifestyle that Srila Prabhupada has given us of simple living and higher thinking, actually, if we followed what Srila Prabhupada says, very quickly, most of our activities from body, mind, and words can move into the mode of goodness. So we can always revisit. And the reason I say revisit is because often when we first start practicing spiritual life, we make a grand gesture in lots of areas of our life, from diet to friendships to employment to so many ways we think, the way we dress, the foods we make big shifts towards aligning ourselves with the mode of goodness. But once we're settled, we may creep back into mindsets, ways of speaking, ways of being, ways of living, which are more governed by passion and ignorance, and not revisit that same enthusiasm and zeal for bringing all of these things to a place which is a stepping stone to transcendence, or Shuddha Sattva. So that's another thing we can look at, is if I'm finding it difficult, am I at least acting from a place of mode of goodness? Am I thinking from a place of mode of goodness? Am I surrounding myself or living my day in such a way that the mode of goodness is allowed to prevail rather than the mode of passion and ignorance? And, we all know this is actually very simple to do. It all starts with how we wake up and how we go to sleep, how we eat, how we sit and stand, how we keep us, even our self-care, our hygiene, all of these things. They're such simple things. They're not new activities that one has to adopt. They're things we already do. We can do them in such a way that they're not just in the mode of goodness, but they're actually in the mode of transcendence. Because when we are doing things in the mode of goodness, it's much easier to go, oh, Krishna, can I offer this too? Isn't it easier to offer a clean house and a clean body to Krishna, a clean mind to Krishna? The mind finds it much easier to go towards Krishna. Right? When a guest comes, you want to offer them the best. When we're in mode of passion and ignorance, we don't, by nature, it blocks us from thinking of Krishna. But even if we wanted to, one may even feel ashamed that how can I offer you this? This is so, rough and ready. It's not so pleasant. So this, again, bringing our activities back to mode of goodness, because it supports our devotional activities. And those devotional activities reinforce our alignment with the purpose of pleasing Krishna, which makes it much easier to cooperate, even when there's diversity of activity, because the natural appreciation is there, because we're united on that front. And then last but not least, I wanted to share that when we do encounter conflicts in any relationship, which we will, and we already have done, and they will continue, we can use that as an opportunity to revisit. Okay. So many different elements have acted to bring me to this point of disagreement or difference of opinion, or even difficult feelings, or maybe all of the above, because sometimes the conflict is within ourselves. How can I realign myself with the purpose? And this can again be done with revisiting, what am I thinking? What are my motives? what are my actions going to be? This whole cause, effect, and doer of the false ego can very easily become transcendental by aligning it with the real ego. And the real ego is constantly thinking, what can I do, say, and how can I be to please Krishna? So when we experience these conflicting ideas or conflicting situations or conflicting feelings, we can again say, okay, when it comes to cause, effect, and being the doer, let me employ that in Krishna's service. What should I say and do and think? And how could I say and do and think to increase my connection with this purpose of pleasing Krishna, even though a conflict has arisen, and also find a way to protect or nourish the other person or other party's Krishna consciousness or relationship with the Lord. So it's not just about bringing back the locus of control to us, but coming to a point where we're so full with the desire to please that it spills over and even considers the other party and the other situation. So this problem of how do we find unity with such diverse activities is a problem that is there from the beginning of creation. It's not just a Kali Yuga problem. You know, we often think, oh, we've got it so hard in Kali Yuga, the odds are stacked against us. And yes, they are. They are definitely stacked against us. You know, you go out there and it's a tidal wave of anti-spirituality. Okay, it's a tidal wave of get sucked in. You know, you are the doer, you are the cause and effect. You know, but actually that is the nature of Mahamaya. That is the nature of cosmic energy. That is the nature of the modes of material nature, to make us dance like puppets, ultimately to Krishna's tune, but in a way which is separated from him. So as they say, we are your creatures. We're yours. We're yours. Everything we have is from you, and we want to serve for your transcendental pleasure. But our diverse activities in this very strange creation, which seems to look on the surface like it's against you, even though it's born of you, makes it difficult for us to work together. What should we do? This is our prayer. Sometimes our prayers they're an expression, but they're also a plea. Right? There's a question in the statement. So it's an eternal problem of the material world. And Srila Prabhupada is being actually very loving by telling us that, you're not going to have harmony in the material world if you live by material rules. But if you're united in your purpose of pleasing the Supreme Personality of Godhead, you can have as much variety as you want, and you'll find harmony, because he's not going anywhere. When we are united in purpose in the service of a particular idea, or even any person here, maybe there's someone you really admire, they're going to be gone at some point. The idea is going to be dead at some point. It's going to be irrelevant at some point. Then what happens? There goes our identity, there goes our cooperation. Krishna's not going anywhere. Krishna's never gone anywhere. He's always been with us, and he'll always stay with us. So if we can align our purpose with pleasing him, that is a purpose that stays forever. So we have time for your reflections. We have great sadhus here. I'd love to hear your reflections, your thoughts on this beautiful verse and purport, and any questions you might have, any corrections. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much, Sri CITI-SAKTI Devi. Thank you so much. We also want to formally recognize His Grace Sarvatma Prabhu. Prabhuji, thank you for blessing our Sangha today. And please, you may unmute and go ahead and share or ask.
Hare Krishna, Sarvatma Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much. You're as brilliant as always. Glad to hear what you have to say. I have 3 points that I noticed. They hit a sympathetic string with me. The first one was that you mentioned quite briefly, actually, about collective consciousness, that there is a does that work as the lower denominator? Well, the lowest standard will prevail, as if there is a, let's say there is a community where most people are kind of middle of the road. No, there are some a little more transcendental than others, but somehow or other there is those who have influence over others. They are actually kanishtas in their behavior. They're devoted, they're hardworking, they're whatever they are, but they don't have great spiritual insights. And will that permeate the collective consciousness, and that's why that community won't prosper? Would you see it like that?
So that's a really, really, really good question. I had a feeling somebody might knuckle down into this topic. That's why I mentioned it. Just put it out there. So if we look at the collective consciousness of a community, okay, it is, consciousness is something that you can't really put mathematics to. But if we applied mathematics to it, it's not so much that the lowest common denominator prevails. What it is that it's you're using more the law of, I guess, averages, right? And so where you've got, beginners, intermediates, and advanced, the smaller the number, right? The smaller the number of each type to get a particular level of consciousness. But the more a community expands, you then have to be very careful and very considered about where energy is being invested in the cultivation of people. Srila Prabhupada gave us the science and motivation to expand and open the doors and windows to everybody. But he also gave us the science and encouraged and actually insisted that we boil the milk. Okay, that we also go deep and become stronger. So simultaneously, as we're growing and the numbers are expanding, of course, more and more beginners are coming in. But if at the same time, those who are already there are not becoming stronger and advancing, the problem that happens with that is, first of all, it lowers the overall collective consciousness because you've got far more people who are beginners than intermediate and advanced, okay? And you can see this in schools. If you've got far few teachers for the students, those students don't grow very much and neither do the teachers, okay? And so you end up with a school which is disorganized and run by people who aren't qualified, because the students end up having to make decisions that they're not qualified to make. So we have this problem, which would be a symptom of if you expand too much but don't nourish and grow those who are already existing. So that reduces the overall collective consciousness. But it also means that on a day-to-day functioning level, you've got, even for leadership positions, the main pool of people that you are choosing from are people who are not that mature. So with this law of averages, it's then inevitable then that let's not get swayed and drowned out by the increasing numbers of beginners, but let's also increase the adhikar, the spiritual maturity, and invest time, money, energy, association in nourishing ourselves and nourishing those who have continued to practice, to go deeper, so that level and the number of people at that level, madhyams and uttams, increases so much that it raises the average. It raises the collective consciousness. So that's why both have to go on. Actually, if anything, it's better we spend time nourishing the people who are here. If we had to choose one, better to pause the expansion and nourish those who are already here, because expansion can be done at any time. But you can't just at any time suddenly just decide, okay, well, let's nourish those who are here. Well, how are we going to nourish the people who are here? Because there's hardly anyone who's nourished left, and there's not enough people. Do you see what I mean? It's only new people left. So we are in danger because we are expanding so fast. We're preaching so much. We're sharing so much. There is a danger that we risk hampering the progress of those who are serious, and therefore the progress of the community as a collective, and just turning into just an ordinary religion, which has lots of numbers, but not very many advanced souls.
But Prabhupada also said that all he needed was one, to make one pure devotee. So, yeah, it's the same principle that you boil the milk and you get something, some kheer out of the watery milk that is the beginning. However, I don't think we have done that very well. Like, for example, a bhakta that I was cultivating, he was driving in Toronto and he saw a sign, Hare Krishna temple, right down the street. And he asked me, should I go? And I didn't know what to say, because I wanted him to go, but I didn't want him to go. I said, well, I do not know who is there. So you may, because the society is so wide, you may find someone who is out of his mind, or fanatical, or very new, or brazen, or whatever. So I will just stay away until, I can tell you, okay, this is a person you can talk to. So this I think we have failed in that sense. At least we haven't gotten that far. I don't want to.
Can I just do you mind if I comment on that?
No, not at all.
It is really sad that we don't trust our own community enough anymore, that we can go with chess, that you can walk into any temple anywhere and I know you're going to be happy. The other side of it, though, is above and beyond all of these, intermediaries who are there in the temples to greet people, whether they're saints or fanatics. Actually, ultimately, Krishna's taking care of each person's spiritual life. And nothing happens without his permission. So even if that person encounters someone who we may think is not the best person for them to encounter, Krishna's arranged it for a reason. And also, in our part of boiling the milk and part of nurturing, the soft devotional creeper, as well as protecting it, we want to nurture it and make it strong. So sometimes, especially if we've got, where we want to invest in relationships with devotees, we invest in such a way that we give them guided exposure. Let them meet the fanatics as well as the saints, but we nourish them in such a way that it won't damage their devotional creeper. It'll just increase their maturity and help them to understand that there's fanatics and saints.
I appreciate your point, yet I thought that this particular bhakta wasn't nurtured enough or mature enough to understand the difference.
I get that.
It's like, if a baby jumps out of a building, I say, and I was underneath, and I would say, no, Krishna will take care of him. No. I think I better intervene. So
absolutely.
It was my prerogative. I may have acted wrongly, but I'm
not saying that. No, I'm not saying that. The reason I was making my point is because, you're somebody who's got some maturity in their spiritual life. You can distinguish where people are at. Not everybody has that. Sometimes people will just, in the mood of divisiveness, says, oh, I'm not going to send my people to that project because, they're all a bit weird. They're all a bit fanatical, or I don't know what things are like there. And they use that to just justify that people should only stay with them. Does that make sense? So I'm just speaking to more that rather than your particular example. I completely trust that you knew what you were doing.
For your benefit, I will change the topic into the other 2 points that I had. One was about the mode of goodness. I somehow or other, it's my feeling. I can't quote from where, but that things should happen organically, even in spiritual life. So I tend to, I don't know if it's like a python, like wait until things walk into my mouth, but I think I wait until things happen, like they're there. They're pretty obvious that okay, this is what I should do. This is how Krishna wants to give me this. So the mode of goodness doesn't come naturally to us, doesn't come organically. So how do you make the transition between distinguishing, okay, I have to keep a clean house. I have to keep a clean body. I have to speak pleasingly and truthfully. I have to do all the things that I have to be tolerant and humble and all these things that come with the mode of goodness. That doesn't seem, because the mode of goodness is not transcendence. However, it's closer. I heard a very good example about someone going to a swimming pool, a local public swimming pool, and goes on time, remembers the combination of the locker, has the clean swimming suit, and goes all the way to this springboard. That's a mode of goodness. And the mode of passion is that you forgot at what time they close, and you don't know where your trunks are. You don't know the locker is the combination locker. You can't remember the numbers. It tried to break it with a so that's the mode of passion. And the mode of ignorance is you just asleep or drugged out, and you can't get it. The point is, the person who is at the springboard, who's in the mode of goodness, hasn't swam yet. It hasn't reached the water. So you can get all the way to the mode of goodness and not transcend. So how do you make the transition? How do you make it part of your life and feel it as a natural thing?
So two things that stood out to me, two things I want to isolate. One is you use this phrase organic, and the other is you also said have to. First of all, we don't have to do anything. Krishna never said to Arjuna, you have to do anything. He said, I've told you everything, deliberate on it and decide to do as you wish. So this is Krishna's recommendation. It's up to us whether we live in the mode of goodness or not. It's ultimately got to be our choice. Do I want to live like this? Do I want to be clean? Do I want to be peaceful? Do I want to be happy? Because if I'm peaceful and clean and enlightened, it is much easier to jump off that springboard. And we've been given Krishna consciousness, so we know that when we jump off the springboard, there's water waiting, right? If you don't know that there's water waiting, you can just end up standing on that springboard for ages, wondering what on earth am I supposed to do? This word organic, though, let's dig deeper into that. If you look at organic farming, and I'm not an expert on organic farming, but I have some basic understanding, is that organic farming is not the same as you just let things just happen. Okay? In organic farming, there is still planning and conscious effort. It's just that effort is with the natural rhythms of the other elements that are part of farming. So, for example, the natural elements of the soil, the other plants that are around, how the seasons move, sunlight, water, etc. And in inorganic farming, there are also purposeful steps, but a lot of those steps go against nature. So they may help the growth of the plant, but they damage other things around, for example, through pesticides. So yes, you're right. There's got to be this balance. If it's inorganic, if our shift to goodness and transcendence is forced, then we may see some short-term benefits, but ultimately won't yield long-term results like you see with inorganic farming. And it will damage people and things and situations around us. And we find ourselves constantly trying to rebalance. So if you look at all the destruction from inorganic farming, we're rebalancing. With organic, you do it, so you grow into, in a purposeful way, you grow into different areas of mode of goodness at a pace that is not so slow that you get stagnant and not so fast that you are overstretched and can't keep any vows or regularity. So with any change, as we shift from whether we're going from ignorance to passion and then passion to goodness, because you've got to use the steps going up to the top of the stairs, go one by one. We can go activity by activity, area of life by area of life. And this is organic. That yes, I'm going to do this consciously, but I'm going to do it systematically with the natural rhythms of life and time, rather than over-endeavoring. Prabhupada was asked once, Srila Prabhupada, how do I know I'm over-endeavoring? And he said, when the things that you're doing, your activities are taking up so much of your time that you don't have time for your own spiritual nourishment, your own sadhana, then you're over-endeavoring. So like, so much service that you don't have time to chant, or so much service you don't have time to chant with quality. It's chanting with quality is about being able to, again, serving in the mode of goodness means I have enough time to sit and chant my rounds. not that I'm running here, there, everywhere, you know, schnick, schnick, giddy, giddy, yum, yum, you know, in between things, and while I'm talking to someone, and, you know, in the car, and this, do you see what I mean? So I agree with you 100%. It's got to be organic, but let's drill down what organic means. It's still purposeful, it's still systematic, but flows with the rhythm.
I'm actually glad that you dissected my laziness and explained so well. And the last point I had, or at least for now, I want to allow others to ask you.
I remember that you have.
My point is about the false ego. How do you distinguish the false ego from the mind and intelligence? Is there a methodology by which we can see actually who's talking?
See, the false ego uses the mind and the intelligence to communicate. Our false ego is made up of our ideas around who we are, right? Who am I in this world? We have a physiological false ego. We have a psychological false ego. We have a social false ego. They're temporary. They're always changing. But that false ego speaks to us through our thoughts, our feelings, and our intelligence. So that is also exactly the way in which we transform the false ego into the real ego, is by feeding the intelligence with transcendental knowledge, by aligning our thoughts and feelings more with those that will be conducive to divine psychology, to divine relationships. So yeah, the voice of the false ego is loud and clear through our thoughts and feelings and intelligence.
If I get around to ask you another question, I will, but I'm going to let someone else.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Saratma Prabhu, and thank you so much, CITI-SAKTI Devi. So, Shrimabara Acharya Prabhu, please, you may unmute. Hare Krishna.
Hi, Hare Krishna, please
Hare Krishna,
accept my
Prabhu.
obligation.
Please accept mine. Mr. Prabhupada.
All glories to Srila Prabhupada. All glories to the Assembly devotees. Thank you very much. Very nice for hearing you speaking nicely. The topic is very interesting, especially talking about unity and diversity, working together, being able to. So these are very practical subject matter that affects everyday life of people and even the community. But I'm just reflecting on something, and I want to hear your take on this. So usually, detachment it's a necessary quality for spiritual advancement. Detachment and indifference is somehow seen like it's not something that is very positive to be indifferent. Now, sometimes it may be very difficult to actually make the difference between being detached and being indifferent. When the more you are detached, the more you are peaceful, in your spiritual life, because you're not looking for any result, and you can live anywhere, you can live with anybody, you can do, because you're actually detached from, whatever is the result. Okay, that's what Krishna wants. That is detachment, isn't it? And indifference. So we frown on indifference. So why he doesn't care? It's not being responsible. Well, they don't really care about what's happening here. So how do we balance, indifference and detachment? Since one seems to be positive, the other seems to be negative. But both of them actually impact on our environment, the way we act. Right.
Very nice question. So there's a few things that come to mind. So as you quite rightly pointed out, that detachment really means that we are pleasing Krishna. That's real detachment, that we move away from our own pleasure and focus on Krishna's pleasure. So in one sense, it's real selfishness because we're focusing on the real self. And actually, where there's detachment, there's great joy. There may not be peace, but there's joy. There's joy in even the difficulty because we know that he is being pleased. With indifference, it can be, as you said, quite selfish. It may make us peaceful because we're not invested in anybody else's feelings. This is an indifferent person, right? It's like, yeah, whatever happens, who cares? Whereas there's detachment. No, I care what happens because I care what Krishna thinks of what I'm doing. So indifference can bring about a personal peace, which is selfish also, but it's not transcendentally selfish. It's, it's selfish in this world because it brings us peace, but it doesn't really matter what happens to anybody else. So in our own lives, we can really be looking to see, am I still seeking for peace like the impersonalist? Or am I willing to experience the joy, even the joy amidst suffering? And that's the joy of pleasing Krishna and his devotees. And that's detachment. And just like Krishna tells Arjun, just fight for me. You'll experience a pleasure that's beyond any pleasure that any of your senses or varna or your ashram or anything can give you. So even though while you're on this battlefield with cuts and bruises and your heart breaking that you're killing the husbands and sons of your, dear cousins and sisters and aunties, you'll feel a great joy because in that sacrifice, in doing it for me, there's a detachment. Whereas Arjun could have said, well, I couldn't care less whether I'm known as a great king or not. I'm indifferent to it. Let me just be at peace. Who cares whether the rest of the world is run by demons? So we can think like this, am I getting caught up in an impersonalist? As long as I'm free of suffering, I'm peaceful, then my spiritual life is good versus actually, am I stretching myself? Am I allowing myself to become a bit more uncomfortable so I can grow and do something pleasing for Krishna? I don't know if that addressed what you raised, Hare Krishna.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you for the response. I had never thought of indifference and detachment, but it makes a lot of sense. There is such a big difference. Thank you so much. Sarvatma Prabhu, please you may unmute.
Okay, here comes the next. The next spike chain on your peaceful. When you meet people, when you have friendship with certain people, whether you brought them to the movement and they left, or they were friends from before and they never joined, and how should we? Of course, Prabhupada said to avoid bad association. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta wrote numerous letters to disciples and well-wishers about practically the most important thing for our spiritual life, besides keeping our vows, is to avoid bad association. So at one point, all these people that were devotees and they're not devotees, but you still have a friendship with them, or friends that you had from before and they never joined, but they feel affection for you and you feel affection for them. How do you deal with this apparent dichotomy that they are within your circle, but there is very little movement, that there is very little you can do with them?
So association is a two-way thing. Even if we just sit next to someone, there's a exchange of consciousness, energy, even fragrance. Right? You sit next to someone on the tube. You don't know what you're going to be smelling like when you walk away. So there's always something, thoughts, consciousness, it travels in the ether. It's what's going on in the sky, in the ether, in the akash. So, but when we are consciously associating, we can be conscious about how we give, and what we take. See, association versus having someone's company. Association is really varying degrees of trusting your opinion as fact, right? And where there's trust, we don't go on to Google and check if every sentence that's coming out of your mouth is correct or not. We accept the opinion as fact. So when it comes to association, regardless of how evolved someone is spiritually or not evolved or invested, we can look at, well, how much am I allowing and willing to accept from this person in influencing my decisions about my spiritual health? And to what degree, or is this a kind of dynamic where actually I take nothing from them about my spiritual health, because that is certainly not something I can get from them, but I can invest in them in terms of trying to share or give them some of my spiritual health, even if it's not directly verbally, but just by being with me. But what can I receive from this person? What can I trust them with? You know, where can I take their opinion as fact? You know, just like you might go to a healthcare professional, you might go see your doctor. You don't wait and go, I'm only going to see a devotee physician or devotee doctor. You're like, this doctor's there. I'm not going to take instruction on him on whether I should chant 16 rounds, or follow the 4 regs, or whether I should follow my Guru Maharaj's instructions or not. But I'm definitely going to hear from this person about my body and mind. And I will reveal in confidence to this person, to my doctor, whoever they are, about my body and mind. But if I go deep into my spiritual practice, if they're not qualified, they're not going to be able to respond appropriately. So then maybe I won't share these things. So association's always a two-way thing. There's always some association, but the depth of how we're affected and how others are affected depends on degrees of trust. And our degree of trust in any relationship can be variable on different parameters. So we may have a high degree of trust in terms of emotional exchange, but low degree in terms of receiving on spiritual knowledge. Or we may have a high degree financially and low degree somewhere else. There's so many different factors to consider in a relationship. However, I think it also depends on where we are at in our Krishna consciousness, and where our faith is weak and still pliable, and we are more likely to get influenced by other people's opinions on a number of matters, including spirituality. Then it is better to get strong in that area, just like you would do in any other discipline. If you wanted to become physically strong and you have friends who are not interested in going to the gym, you're not going to take their advice on going to the gym. If they say, oh, don't go, I'm feeling lazy, what's the point of going? You look great. If you accept that from them, you're never going to get strong. And for a while, you may have to, whilst you're changing the culture and intelligence of your mind to achieve that goal, may need to take some space until you're strong in your discipline. And then when you speak to your friends, you know that even if they say, oh, don't bother going, who cares? They know, it doesn't affect you. And then it gets to a point where they're like, they don't even say that to you. In fact, they admire the fact that you're so disciplined. So even our friendships or people we keep the company of, the stronger our faith and actions become, the more the dynamic shifts in that they also then become more receptive to receiving. And I'm sure you've seen this in your many years of your Krishna consciousness.
Doesn't matter. I love picking your brain. I have one further point about that, hearing you speak on this. What about a friend from childhood who is a very competent doctor and he's been loyal to me. He will make jokes. In his mind, there were jokes about, why don't you eat some meat or something like that. So I told him, and I let it run for a few times. And then I said in no uncertain terms, my vision of your humor is imbued with cruelty. And I will not like to experience that from you, because it will actually make our relationship tense. So could you please avoid it? And he acknowledged it, and
how polite of you.
Yeah,
rather than saying shut up.
Yeah, well, I'm kind of translating into the non-verbal.
Okay.
I actually said the other example is a friend who actually came to Krishna consciousness because of my influence and left Krishna consciousness. So he left with quite a bit of cynicism. So he can't help, or doesn't want to help, throw some my way, like, that psychology is as important as spiritually. So he analyzes through the mind, but he could analyze through scripture or the soul, et cetera, et cetera. So how do you deal with cynicism in someone who actually had share the same vision that you have, but no longer has it?
Just because they no longer have it doesn't mean they can't get it again. And so just the same way you brought them in, they were inspired by something. There's still some connection there. You just have to find a different way of associating with them, right? And it doesn't even have to be with an invested interest like, oh, I've got to get them back. But there's still, it's just the dynamics of how you give and receive has changed with that person. It is disappointing. It's heartbreaking when somebody who we feel we've made that connection with and brought in chooses to, take a step away. One can't help but think, could I have done something different to avoid this? Could I have helped in some way? Is it too late? You can't help but think that. It's natural.
Actually, let me interrupt here for a second.
Sure.
I did see it coming because he was very critical, and I warned him. I said, you're actually digging a hole to bury that you think is someone else, but you're burying yourself. So stop using the shovel until, because you're going to actually bury yourself. So it happened. It happened. Now, automatically, he became distended and bury himself in other things but Krishna consciousness. So even with warning, sometimes it doesn't work. And just to take credit away from me, most people that I preach to have joined other movements, not our movement. I have people who became Catholics and joined yoga societies, and I'm still working on people turning into Jehovah's Witness and Mormons. I haven't succeeded, but not very good at bringing people.
Thank you, Krishna.
Anyway, I thank you for that. So
Thank you. No comment.
Well, Hare Krishna. Thank you so much, Sabatma Prabhu. At least you made them taste Krishna consciousness. So that in itself is glorious. Srimavara Acharya Prabhu, please, you may unmute.
Yeah, Hare Krishna. I'm driving, and I hope my voice is clear enough.
Yes.
Okay, fine. So, Mataji, you just said something that I've been reflecting on. I can't understand it. Maybe you have to clarify a little bit. You said that you can feel joy when you're detached. And if you're indifferent, like the impressionist, you can feel peaceful, but there's no joy. And I'm trying to understand that. I've been reflecting on that. But Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, if I take your word joy, to me happiness. Krishna says in the Gita that how can there be happiness without peace? Because most often, those who manifest some kind of detachment as a spiritual quality, yes, they are peaceful. And okay, maybe are they joyful? Okay, but they are peaceful, and that makes them look happy also. Of course, in personalism, we can understand they are simply looking just for their own selfish peace of mind, and they don't care what happens to others. But in this quality of detachment in spiritual life, brings peace also for those who care very little about what is going on around them. And most often people see them to be more advanced because they will neither comment, criticize, or even try to change anything that may not be going right because they don't care. For them, whatever is the result, that's what Krishna wants. So anyway, I just wanted to clarify when you say that detachment can bring joy and indifference or selfishness to bring peace. But Krishna says there can be no happiness without peace. So that means you need one to get the other. Can you please explain? Hare Krishna.
There can be no happiness without peace if that peace. Yes, look, I agree. Of course, I'm not going to disagree with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but Vaishnavas are not interested in being happy. Vaishnavas are interested in Krishna being happy and his devotees being happy. So there's this very interesting statement that Bhakti Maharaj makes in the Surrender book. He says that we are always going to be disturbed. The difference is, are we disturbed for ourselves or are we disturbed for others? Because actually, when we are detached, what we're detached from is what am I going to get from this? But we are very attached to how are Krishna and his devotees going to be benefited by this. And so that can even lead to some level of disturbance because we don't like to see other people suffering. We trust that Krishna's got everything in hand and everything's going according to his plan. But because we have the compassionate heart of Vaishnav, we feel pain for others. So this is higher than peace. And this gives a joy beyond just being joyful and peaceful in this world. See, our human psychology being joyful and peaceful is not an accurate representation of spiritual joy. Spiritual joy is felt in the soul. You know, one can be very psychologically happy and peaceful and spiritually dead. One can appear to be and experiencing a human psychological distress and actually feel great joy in the spiritual heart. We look at Chaitanya Charitamrita and the symptoms of ecstasy of Mahabhav. Some of them are so distressing. When I read them, I'm like, this could be a psychotic illness. You know, if in the background or at the core of this, there wasn't ecstatic symptoms for the Lord. So because the mind and body and the brain are responding in a distressed way to the elation of the soul. So I think there are layers to this. There are stages to this. And they can all coexist depending on, which stage you're at and where you're looking at this from. So yes, peace is an entry point for happiness. But what kind of happiness are we really, trying to chase for?
Well, Hare Krishna, thank you so much, CITI-SAKTI Devi. I have one question, okay, but I would like to say something briefly on this theme of joy and happiness. One thing I believe strikes a big difference between joy and happiness is that one may be happy without necessarily rendering any service, but you cannot feel joy without rendering service. And that is the more reason why joy pertains to spirituality much more than happiness. We derive joy from doing something good for somebody. When we do something for somebody, the person becomes content with whatever we've done. We feel joy doing that. But somebody may be able to sit at one place and have peace of mind, peace of the self, without doing anything for anybody. That is my little understanding. But I have a question. My question is, Srila Prabhupada has said this in so many ways, so many times. The us is an us because even though the owner is feeding the ass with the grass, But in order for the ass to be fed with the grass, it has to carry very heavy load on its back. Meanwhile, if the ass turns to its right or left, there is abundance of grass. But that is how the ass is designed. Now, these demigods who understand Krishna much better than most of us are telling us that our nature is that we cannot truly be happy and working cooperatively because that is not how we are designed. I mean, it will be unwise, so to speak, to blame a cat stealing your fish because you know that it's its nature. Now, if the Supreme Lord has designed me not to cooperate with others, not to have the common understanding that I have to do this with other person, like he himself says in the Gita that the cooperation between human and demigods will bring in rain and there will be grain. But if the Supreme Lord, by the nature of this material world, has designed this world in such a way that there will be no cooperation, then why is it that we get blamed for not cooperating? If that is how we've been designed to behave. So please help. I'm speaking from the DA's office. This is the devil's advocate or the district attorney's office, please. And you are representing Krishna, so this is to Krishna through you. Hare Krishna.
So he's designed material nature at our request, so we can, because we requested, hey, I don't want to cooperate. I want to be in the center, please. So he says, okay, then I have to create a world and an identity for you where you get to be the center without cooperating with anybody else because you just want to have it your way. So first of all, he's not designed us like that. Our nature is to cooperate. Our nature is to love. Our nature is to serve. Our nature is to be united and to be grateful and kind and forgiving. That's our actual nature. But the nature of the bodysuit and the temporary nature he gives us is one that is in opposition to our real nature because we ask for it. So he has to design a completely separate place for all of that to go on. So when his devotees, like these demigods who are saying, we are your creatures, we've now appeared here and we've now been given these activities to do in this realm where it's all designed to make us, just stand for ourselves, but we don't want to forget you. We don't want to forget you. We want to work together to serve you. So this is where the human being, the human birth comes into play. See, animals don't go against their nature. You don't see animals with eating disorders unless a human being has imposed it on them. They don't eat too much. They don't sleep too much. They don't eat too little. They don't sleep. They just do what's in their nature. So the soul goes from one animal species to another naturally. There's transmigration of the soul. But when it comes to the human birth, where there is the intelligence and ability to read prayers such as this, to reflect, to exercise my free will. Do I want to align my human psychology with my divine psychology? Or do I want to continue playing the body game, playing the temporary nature game? Then we are much more accountable. And so, yes, the world is designed in such a way to allow us to be separate from Krishna and separate from everybody else. But all the solutions we need are also in this world, should we choose to not want to live like that anymore. It would be different if he says, fine, you asked for this, I'm done with you, you're stuck with it, you ain't got a way out. Then how can we be accountable? Because then there's no choice. We're forced to live like this. There's no other option. But we're not forced to live like this. First of all, we chose to live like this. And then when we choose not to live like this, there's another option. So neither is forced. Leaving isn't forced, staying isn't forced. There's always an option. So that's why we are accountable, because we can make a choice.
Wow. Yeah, it's true. We can make a choice. Well, I don't usually, thank you, I should say. Thank you for the answer.
That's okay. I
and
don't mean to
I'm
be a
being- I'm
party
being-
pooper. I only have 4 minutes left, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
I can
Okay,
probably
good.
take one more question or a comment.
Okay. In that case, I will give up my question if someone else has something to ask. But
I don't think they do. So I think you should go ahead.
Well, all right. See, this probably might take a little much more time, but I'll try to be brief. I was praying and somehow Krishna answered my prayer today. I wish Krishna does that much often. That I get the opportunity to ask this question I'm about to ask, and you did touch on it, even though briefly. But most of us are having a very serious misunderstanding of Krishna's statement in the Gita that there is not even a blade of grass that moves without the sanction of the Supreme Lord. And this has led to some people, some devotees. There is one particular individual, I won't mention the name. I admire him very much, a very, very intellectual individual, very intelligent individual. But he does not believe in the existence of God because he says that those who believe there is God also say that God is all good, all kind, all loving. And if whatever happens can never happen without the sanction of God, and God allows all this mess around us, then it's either God is not all loving or he does not exist at all. But my understanding of not even a blade of grass moves without the sanction of God means that we as individuals, first of all, make the move, and then the Supreme Lord allows it or not. But I would like you to actually help address what is the meaning of not even a blade of grass moves without the sanction of God, because whatever happens to devotees say, nothing can happen without Krishna, so just accept it. And if that is the case, I don't understand why we're trying to preach. So if you may help, please.
Where is the balance between Krishna allowing things to happen and our own accountability? We can go down many avenues with this discussion. This point of God being all good, all loving, God is everything. Krishna is everything. He's the source of everything. Even that which we experience as difficult or evil, the source of it is still Krishna. The hellish planets, the source of the hellish planets is Krishna, right? So where is that line between, okay, I'm going to do this, but ultimately I can only do this, and any result I'm rewarded or awarded is ultimately sanctioned by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, right? So why does Krishna allow bad or good things to happen? First of all, in this world, bad and good is relative. Ask anybody who you think's done a bad thing whether they've done a bad thing. They won't say they've done a bad thing. They will try and justify why they did what they did. Even a criminal will justify why they did what they did. Even pedophiles. I've treated pedophiles who will say that it's completely natural to be a pedophile. You're probably all sitting there thinking, I can't get my head around that. So this whole idea of Krishna sanctioning, it doesn't mean that Krishna wants it to happen. Krishna doesn't want anyone to suffer. Krishna didn't even want us to leave him in the first place. But he allowed it to because he honors our freedom of choice, our free will. But as the source of everything, unless he allows it to happen, it ain't going to happen. Okay? So there's a big difference between Krishna allowing it versus Krishna wanting it. And as Vaishnavas, we're trying to connect with Krishna wanting. What does Krishna want? Rather than what does Krishna allow? I mean, even in this chapter, as Maitreya Rishi is describing the manifestation of creation from the Mahatattva, every single step, for the next stage to happen, Krishna just glances. That's his allowing it to happen. It has to have his glance. So it shall be. So it shall be. You want this? So it shall be. But so it shall be that you will also have to suffer or enjoy the consequences of it. He also allows that to happen. So he allows so many things to happen. Our perception of good or bad just depends on what kind of modes our false ego is tied into in terms of thinking of ourselves as the cause, effect, and the doer. So yes, Krishna is all good. He is all loving. And he is also everything else. And he can allow everything to happen. Not even a blade of grass moves without him allowing it to. And yet we still have free will and choices. And him allowing is not the same as him wanting. Just like a parent will allow their child to learn from their mistakes, even if it causes the child a lot of pain, that doesn't mean that they want their child to suffer. Does that make sense?
Very much. Yes, that reminds us all about Srila Prabhupada and his son and the fan. No, so yes, thank you so much. Yes, please, Sarvatra Prabhu.
Just one word for your friend. Just tell him that to blame God for evil is like blaming a city planner because there's a prison included in the city plan.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
It's not inviting anybody to go to prison. They do it themselves.
Mm-hmm. Praise the
Thank
Lord.
You. Thank you. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
CITI-SAKTI, thank you so much. And Sarvatra Prabhu, thank you so much. Dear devotees, we thank you all so much. We are going to humbly request you all, devotees, to kindly unmute. And we all chant Hare Krishna Mahamantra to express our deepest appreciation and gratitude to our revered speaker, Her Grace CITI-SAKTI Devi, for sharing her love, wisdom, and time with us today. So please, may you all unmute. Jai. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare. Vancha kalpatarubhyastat, sindubhya cha, patitanam pavanebhyo, vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. All glories to Grace CITI-SAKTI Devi ki jai. Jai jai.
Hare Krishna, everyone.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Hare
Rama.
Rama.